Hello, hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted, the live call-in show that happens every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time. This is a show where we talk about what people believe and why, and we are on the third night of Theist Month, where I am featuring exclusively theist guests as my regular guests, which I have every single week as well. And this week is Megan Lewis of the YouTube channel Digital Hammurabi. Megan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. It's nice to be here.
Yes, I am excited that you get to be my guest tonight. Megan, we've known each other for a little over a year now, I think. So this is fun because, this is something that I've thought about doing an episode on before, actually, because I'll let you introduce yourself in a second, but like you do a lot of cool stuff on your channel. And you are married to an atheist, but you identify as a Christian, and so that's something that you get asked about a lot. I'm glad that we can talk about that a bit tonight. But talk about Digital Hammurabi for a second. What is it that you do on the channel?
Sure. So Digital Hammurabi is kind of like a public outreach academic type YouTube channel. We do a lot of work on the ancient Near East, which is the history of Iraq and Iran. But also the Southern Levant, and we try and get Egyptologist guests on as well to kind of broaden our horizons a little bit. Both Josh and I are Assyriologists, which means we went to grad school for far, far too long. I don't really recommend that to many people. And he obviously graduated with his PhD. I got 7 years in and decided that I was going to have a nervous breakdown if I tried to finish. So I have 2 master's degrees in Assyriology, which still really is more than any one person needs. But that means I do a lot of like Mesopotamian history, mythology, literature. And when I have the time, I do read Akkadian and Sumerian, but it's been a while since I did that.
That's good, because I sometimes can't spell things right in English on Twitter. So you're already doing better in the language department than I am.
The great thing about Akkadian especially is that there are so many ways of spelling things.
Oh, that's good.
It's pretty much phonetic, so you just sound stuff out. And
here's the thing.
Sometimes they don't write letters where they should be, and that's okay.
As you can tell, for viewers who are watching this live, I got the green screen behind us again, and we pulled up some ancient cuneiform. And I'll be honest, I'm not even 100% sure what language is going on behind me, and it could be something that could be demonetizable by YouTube standards, but only Megan would know. So I think we're good, right?
I think you're probably fine. I mean,
okay.
to be brutally honest, looking at it, I can't tell off the top of my head what language it is either.
Oh, okay.
I suspect it's Akkadian, but it might not be. It could be like Old Persian or something.
There is one Akkadian person out there who, or I guess it wouldn't be. That would just be the nationality then, right? It wouldn't. Even be, there's somebody out there that's mad. That was the point. That was the joke I was going to make.
Someone somewhere is mad.
But now it doesn't even make any sense. So anyway, we're just going to move on. So Megan, you have been doing this project with Dr. Josh, who was on about a month ago. For those of you who want to check that out, don't click to it right now. Obviously, you're listening to this episode. But it was really interesting to get his take because, the work that he's done has influenced his personal beliefs a lot about religion in general, but also like his ideas of God, his ideas of Christianity, and how he kind of related to the world. And so like, I was kind of curious, the work that you do with Digital Hammurabi, and also just obviously your background in academia and everything else, like how has that influenced your own religious beliefs?
In all honesty, not a massive amount. And I think a lot of that is because I wasn't raised with biblical inerrancy. I was actually quite surprised when I came to the States and discovered that there's a large number of people who genuinely think that the earth flooded and that like Adam and Eve were real people in an actual garden, because that was always explained to me growing up as like myth, allegory, stories that people try and use to explain where they came from, like not actually something that really happened. So learning that there's this kind of literary tradition, an ancient Near Eastern literary tradition that includes like flood narratives, and that the word Eden is actually just kind of an Akkadian word for like step. like it doesn't faze me because I didn't have that foundation of everything in the Bible is literally true.
Interesting. Yeah, like I kind of grew up half and half. Like some of it was definitely true, but also some of it could be metaphor. It just kind of depended on who you talk to. You know, it was definitely a little more of a mixed crowd. But it does surprise me too when I meet other people whose entire backgrounds was, yes, this was the absolute truth. The Earth is 6,000 years old, and here's the exact things that happened on the first couple days. You know, that is something that I couldn't relate to as much because I grew up in a household that was fine with evolution and was fine with like a bunch of other stuff that maybe other Christians wouldn't. So it does kind of surprise me too sometimes, like even though I've been talking about this for so long, that like, yeah, that is the mindset that people have with this stuff. So, you know, with that perspective in mind, that, you know, it's a bit more of a sort of looser look at the Bible, right? A more academic perspective than maybe what the average church, you know, might talk about with the Bible. I mean, like, how does that influence your personal faith at all? Because there are some people, and I'll just to clarify, just because like people I've talked to on this show who say that, yes, it's because of my academic look that they say that they're not Christians anymore because of what they've studied and because that they don't, the faith doesn't really mean anything to them. So it's interesting to hear from you because you're the only person well, you're not the only person I know, but the person I regularly talk to that doesn't view it that way. So I'm just curious how you feel about that.
It's kind of it's weird, and I think there is definitely a disconnect, and I think I'd probably have to examine it more deeply if I did any kind of New Testament studies. Like I'm pretty sure that Jesus is an historical figure, but I genuinely don't know where I land on the resurrection, which to many people's minds just means, well, you're not a Christian. You can't possibly be.
Right.
Okay, fair enough. You may think of me what you want. That's absolutely fine.
Sure.
I've been told I'm not a Christian many times. And it doesn't really matter. I think that the religion I was raised with emphasizes far more the whole treat your neighbor as yourself, be kind to people, and God loves everyone, rather than a strict adherence to doctrine. So
sure.
it doesn't mesh in terms of a lot of people's beliefs, and I know it's logically probably quite incoherent, but I'm comfortable with that at the moment.
So it's sort of like, it seems like Christianity is it informs your life stance, maybe informs your interactions with people, and maybe that's more important than
I think that's a really good way. I think that's a really good way of phrasing it. And
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I seem to be running into that these past couple of weeks. I think like not to say that my previous guests or that people I've talked to don't have, you know, their own sort of logic to their beliefs, but that at the end of the day, it seems like the historical reality of a lot of these events portrayed in the Bible, whether Jesus cursed a fig tree or actually multiplied fish or walked on water or even rose from the dead, as I found out from Joe last week and talked with you as well, like that seems to fall on the wayside as to kind of what the general Christian message is supposed to be, at least in a certain interpretation, which is to kind of, you know, be good to people, right?
Yeah.
So it's just interesting. Yeah.
I think that's absolutely the case. And it's I think if I'd been raised with this biblical inerrancy like Josh was, like a lot of other people were, then my research and my education would definitely cause massive problems, because once you get really into the ancient Near Eastern contexts, the legal side of things, really just what the Bible describes, a lot of the narrative is pretty horrific. Old Testament and New Testament.
Sure.
And obviously there is this question of, did Jesus even exist? I think that would be, like, all of that would be quite distressing, and probably, I suspect I'd probably be an atheist.
Yeah, that's distressing to me too. If like if the God, at least of the Old Testament, is real, like that's a distressing thought to be.
Yeah, it's not a nice dude.
Yeah, like I would be. I'm almost relieved that he's not. I mean, I am relieved that he's not. You know, like I do find relief in my sense of non-belief. It wasn't that way for me at first. At first, it was this terrifying, oh no, there's no black and whites anymore. There's a lot more grays in the world that I have to wrestle with because I may not be accountable for my actions in a second life somewhere, you know, or you know, all this time I've been putting into this thing turns out to not have been real in some way. It was real in the sense that I was in community with people and I had, you know, met friends through that and had, you know, interactions that were deeply personal to me. But the grand plan is kind of for naught, at least from my perspective. Like I wasn't working towards saving souls because there were no souls to save, literally. So, you know, that's why it's fascinating to have, I don't know, conversations with Christians who didn't need all that extra stuff. That kind of other stuff just kind of falls on the wayside. So
for me, the emphasis is and really always has been. And for those listening who don't know, I was raised Anglican. When I'm in the UK with my family, I worship at an Anglican church. When I'm here, when I go to church, it's been a while. Like a couple of years, but when I go to church, I normally will go to an Episcopalian church. I've worshipped as a Quaker before, and the overriding thing with all of the congregations I've been a part of is less about follow the Bible to the letter, or as like this version of the Bible to the letter, and much more about this is our community. Our church community exists in a much wider community. How can we make it a better place for everyone, regardless of whether they sit next to us on a Sunday morning or not?
Yeah. And I like that. But like for me personally, and I'm wondering what you think about this. Like I don't need the baggage that Christianity comes with to like do everything that you just talked about, right? Because I think you and I would both agree that Christianity has a lot of baggage.
Oh,
right.
Yeah,
like, like, you know, there's like, it's hard because if I was to tell someone I was a Christian again, like, you know, say that I sincerely believed, right. And I told someone that, I don't know what they would think of me in that moment because it's such a broad enough label there.
Yeah.
Where like, I personally would, even when I was a progressive Christian, I mean, was trying to reclaim that. But like at the end of the day, now that I kind of have a fuller picture than I did before, that would be really hard for me. I don't know.
Yeah. No, when I tell someone I'm a Christian, I want to follow it up with, don't worry, I'm not one of those Christians. Like I'm queer, totally happy with the queer community.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stand here and judge you and tell you that you're going to suffer in hellfire and damnation because you don't think the same way that I do, or because you choose to live your life differently. Like, as long as you're doing your best to live a life that does not negatively impede on other people, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, that's like, do you think because your work, I would argue, and you know this because you see your comment section and stuff, I argue that it's probably mostly atheists watching your stuff.
It is, which has been absolutely fascinating. And I think part of that is to do with how the channel started, because we started, Josh went on the dearly departed Non Sequitur show to talk about Mesopotamia and mythology, and I think this was a flood narrative discussion. And someone in the comments, I think it was MathPig, asked, does this guy have his own YouTube channel? And I was like, we should do that, because neither of us are going to have a traditional academic career. It's not possible because of our personal situations. So this is a really great way to share the knowledge that we've been privileged to gain, and to kind of keep our hand in the field. So because it kind of started at that point, and Non Sequitur and a lot of the other atheist YouTube community were so generous in pointing their audience towards us and having us on for interviews, and kind of, especially Josh, asking about like the Hebrew Bible, because it's much more Josh's specialty than it is mine. I think because of that, we definitely have a huge atheist space. And it's I love it because
Yeah.
I love just people being interested in what we do anyway. But it's definitely interesting that it's all coming from this kind of atheists essentially wanting to understand the Old Testament and the environment in which it was written. Like, and this is a recurring theme. They are so much more interested than most of the Christians that you'll come across on the internet, because what we're saying and the world that we're trying to illuminate really doesn't fit into the fundamentalist Christian narrative. So they're not terribly interested, whereas the atheists actually want to know the historical truth. Name of the show, but truth is a really hard thing to get at, especially with history. So they want to know the historical facts and data so that they can draw their own conclusions and kind of understand things better. I like it a lot.
Yeah. It's fun to look at it now because I'm not in a space where I'm wrestling with that as like how to like determine my reality, right? Like the conclusions that academics would call to today in New Testament or Old Testament scholarship are not going to immediately affect how I like interact with the world. Whereas if I was a Christian, they absolutely would, because the exact interpretations of what these books are supposed to mean, I would have to follow, because that's kind of the way that I was taught to express Christianity, right? Which obviously, you know, isn't everybody's Christian experience, but it was certainly mine. Like I didn't understand what it meant to be a Christian without this Bible thing, right? So that's fascinating that you get that response. I'm curious on your part, because like your channel has grown to the point where I am sure that somebody was a Christian maybe isn't a Christian anymore, and that might be in part because of the work that you've done on the channel. Does that bother you in any way?
No, because I think that the form of Christianity that we see so often on YouTube and in the US media is incredibly damaging and very toxic. And actually, if what we're doing helps people find a healthier way to be and brings them or helps them come to some kind of peace in terms of, okay, this isn't real, this isn't truth, I am not getting judged on a daily basis, and that is helpful for them, then I would much rather that than them just kind of keep going and keep being unhappy and scared all the time.
Yeah that's an answer I would hope you would say. Right, I mean, I hope you would come to that, but for a lot of reasons. But yeah, like I admire that. I do admire that, because like sometimes looking at the facts of things just means you have to change your mind about stuff. And I mean, we talk about that all the time on this show, but that is like, I think one of the hardest things a human being can do. I really think it is. And I'm grateful that there's voices like you out there who are, you know, willing to be at peace with that in terms of your own personal faith, in terms of not letting like other people, because like I'll say this, like for as long as I've known you, you have been a proponent of atheists and atheist rights the whole way through. So
it's like, what other people think and how they choose to worship or not is absolutely none of my business. And the fact that you are an atheist should not stop you from pursuing any career or living in any part of the world. And like it's really, this is, sorry, a little bit of a tangent, it's very strange to me that religion is so politicized in the US. Like I'm relatively sure that the British Prime Minister is Anglican, but I've never heard him talk about it. I probably never will. And I mean, I take issue with Boris Johnson for any number of reasons, but like, it's strange to me that in order to be considered a good person, you must also be an outspoken Christian. Yeah. Especially because the kind of speech that often comes with that is hatred and the exact antithesis of what I would consider Christianity to be. I just, what you believe is none of my business. As long as you're not hurting anyone else, I don't care.
I think there's a silent judgment there that comes with it too, even if you don't outwardly say so. Like I can tell from my, just personal experience with my friends and family who know that I do this show, who know that, I don't believe the same anymore. Like I can't tell exactly what they think, but I know that it's different from what it was before. I don't have, in a lot of cases, I don't have the same kind of relationships that I did because my relationships with them were in the context of a Christian community. And so now that I don't share that same commonality with them, it becomes much different, I guess. And some of them respect my past, some of them don't. But yeah, I guess, it's good to remember that this isn't just it's not a global phenomenon all the time. There are places where people don't give a shit, but I mean, the US isn't exclusive to that either. I mean, we get calls and messages from people all around the world who do suffer from that kind of bigotry, and it sucks. I don't like it.
I think the atheist activists that I've been privileged to meet through YouTube are some of the bravest people I've ever met, because the abuse you guys have to sit through. I mean, for every one person telling me I'm not a real Christian, I'm sure you get hundreds of people telling you that you're going to hell and that you can't possibly be a good person and what you're doing is sinful and wrong. And then you hear stories about people's families just like kicking them out because they believe differently. And it's incredibly brave, I think, to do the work that you guys do.
Well, I appreciate that. And for your part, Megan, I would say I am thankful that there are Christians out there who are willing to speak out for atheist rights and who want to acknowledge that atheists can be in the same space doing good work. Because I kind of said this last week, but look, I expect that there's going to be Christians for the rest of my life that I'm going to have to work with. I'm going to have to figure out a plan with getting along. Would I prefer you be an atheist? I don't know. I mean, like, I do think that I don't believe Christianity is true in any meaningful sense. So, in that sense, like there's a truth statement there that I'd like you to acknowledge, because maybe that would change the way you do things. But like, but I do wonder to what point, because I don't know. There is like this. I think this happens a lot in political discourse as well that we have today, which is like, how much do we have to agree with other people to like work with them? I'm still struggling with this myself. I don't know, but I do know that I've known you for long enough to know. I mean, obviously you're married to Josh, so in some sense you're married to the atheist community, Megan. I mean, that's I
think I'm at the stage now where all of my closest friends, or with the exception of my family, all of my closest relationships are with atheists. And I'm very happy with that. I feel very lucky that I've been accepted the way I have been, and very lucky that I've met the people I have.
Hell yeah. Well, I am glad that I knew you as well, and I'm glad that you're doing the work on Digital Hammurabi. You guys should check out that channel if you haven't already, and then also check out the episode we had about a month ago with Dr. Josh. But we should get to some calls now, Megan. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do that. Before we get to calls, though, we have to shout out the patron of the week. Every single week, I get to shout out one of you awesome patrons that decides to donate to the show. Thank you guys for doing that. This show is almost entirely run by volunteers, and the funds for like setting up this green screen and doing the audio and other tech work here, it all happens through volunteers. So thank you guys for donating and making that happen. So this week's patron of the week is, drum roll, please. Never mind, no drum roll. Mackenzie Quattlebaum. Thank you, Mackenzie, for donating to Truth Wanted. And thank you to all the patrons who donate to Truth Wanted. You guys rock. It's the best. Love doing this show for you guys. Cool. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get to some calls here. Want to talk to Lucas, who's calling in from Texas. Lucas, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, what's going on?
What's going on, Lucas? Just talking with Megan, having a good time.
That's what's up. Hey, I had one specific thing I called in for, but after listening to y'all, I have one question I'd like to ask Megan. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
If Megan's all right with it, then go ahead.
Absolutely.
It's not like a bad question or anything. I'm worried about like your concept of hell. Do you believe in hell?
No, I do not.
Okay, I guess a follow-up question, do you believe people live after they die?
I actually don't know. And I find that quite distressing and quite scary. I have no idea.
You're way different from my family.
Yeah, I don't know. The hell stuff was always freaky to me. That was definitely a real thing for me in Christianity. But then also looking at, we've talked about this before, the actual historical data that we have on people talking about hell, which again is always just written by people who have never actually been there themselves. It seems to be a nebulous concept at best.
Right. All right. Well, that's the only question I had. I was just curious about that. But I guess to get to what I actually called about, I've called the show a couple of times in the past month and a half. And I'm the guy who has a family of preachers. My oldest brother, he's a preacher in the southeast side of America. And I had a conversation with him earlier this week. And the conversation ended the way our conversations always end. So every time I talk to him about our differences with the religion, and it comes to like, why does he believe in a God and why do I not believe in a God? He'll always give me like 3 or 4 answers of why he believes, and then after I give my arguments against those, it ends up with him coming to his survival from cancer. My brother is a cancer survivor, so he always comes back to, I survived cancer, and that could not have happened without God. That's every single conversation. That's what it always comes down to. And when he brings that up, I kind of just end the conversation as quick as I can, because I don't want to be an asshole. I don't want to say something. Yeah, I mean, because that's a deeply personal thing. He could have died from that. So I don't want to be rude or come off as being mean by trying to arguing against his that he survived cancer.
You don't want to be wrong, but but we do acknowledge, like, factually he is wrong, and we know that because there are atheists that survive cancer. Like there are people who have no concept of God who have had cancer and who have survived. There have been people before Christianity was around that have had cancer and have survived it. I mean, like, we can demonstrate a lot of this. I'm not sure how you demonstrate ancient people having cancer. I'm sure they figured that out somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if they do some sort of analysis on, I don't know, bone density or something. I'm not paid to talk about that. I'm just here to talk about other stuff. But anyway, yeah, like I think, I mean, if I was having that conversation and I really wanted to be, respectful of that, I would ask, well, what do you think about people who believe differently, who have survived cancer? Like, would it be fair for a Muslim person to say that Allah, well, maybe they might go, at that point they might say, oh yes, well, because God can work in different people. But what about people who have different God concepts, or even no God concepts at all, that do religious ritual, and you can take your pick and found healing through that? Is that enough evidence to, come to the conclusion that it's because of this event that the cancer was healed? I mean, we make these mistakes all the time, and history is rife with medical anecdotes. I mean, they're like, medicine as a whole is just a series of like doing a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't work until we find stuff that does work, and like keeping up cultural beliefs of stuff that doesn't work because we've been doing it for a long time. And cancer, unfortunately, is one of those things where we're probably going to keep having it for a long time, and people are going to make big attributions to it because it is a very harsh time and very, it make people very emotionally vulnerable. And it makes me mad that people like do get this holy water that they found off of some late night television evangelist program and make the claim that, oh, it's because of this that they were healed, because it's just not true. So yeah, I don't know if I'm actually helping here, but I guess I would just go the gentle questioning route of, well, what can we look at other examples, and can we make the same kinds of claims? Because medical health is a big thing to talk about. Like, I think it's reasonable, but I don't know. Megan, what do you think?
Yeah, I haven't really done that too much. I mean, I've responded one time. I didn't respond to it this last week, but I've responded one time talking about how, okay, God's going to help him survive cancer, but yet God lets 30,000+ children die of starvation every day. And he literally said to me, well, God's got a different plan for everybody. That's like almost the exact words of what he said. And I didn't know how to respond to that. But
I think that's the problem with this kind of argument. I feel like that's the problem with this kind of argument, is that you see this, and I'm sorry, I keep going back to like YouTube Christians, because it's like the most contact I have with this kind of argumentation. But then it doesn't really matter what kind of argument you bring up. There's always like a sidestep, and then you just kind of keep going forward. And the whole, like, God works in mysterious ways really does work for literally anything that you want to bring up to these people.
Anything.
Yeah.
If the problem of evil stopped people from being Christians, we would have stopped having Christians like way long ago.
Exactly.
Like way long ago, because like like Christianity itself is built into this idea that there are people that suffer, and like, and again, this is open to multiple interpretations, but there is an interpretation that says that, it's because of sin. It is because of human beings doing wrong. And so we have to make atonements for that. And that's why you absolutely need this religion, and that is, in my opinion, a terrible thing. That's like one of the worst things you can do to a human person, to tell them that they are worthless.
It's your own fault.
And that it's your own fault, and that your physical maladies are the result of something you did or your prior generations did, which is something that a lot of ancient peoples believed. And you don't see that as much today now. It was definitely a thing that was prevalent back in the day. So like it's frustrating, because it puts your brain in a place that, I don't know, doesn't make a lot of logical sense, doesn't really match up with reality. But like, you're right, Megan, you put it perfectly. It's a sidestep. It was a sidestep for me, and it's also a result of privilege in some ways too. When you realize, like, you're in,
it's really easy to make that kind of argument when you are coming from a place of privilege, and when, like Lucas's brother, when you have survived something traumatic, it's much easier to say, I survived because God singled me out for whatever reason. Whereas the people who were living,
Megan, do you believe that that's possible, that it was God?
I mean, I don't know. I find it unlikely. And then the problem with that argument, God saved me, is that, okay, if he saved you, then he condemned many, many, many others to death. Because if he is able to cure you specifically from cancer, then he's able to cure other people from cancer, and for some reason chose not to. And the like grand plan thing, I've never found it a terribly convincing argument, because how does this one person's death somehow serve to, like, how does it serve to further God's purpose? Josh and I lost a child last year, and to use that argument to say, well, it's God's plan, he's in a better place, that's bullshit. I don't see how condemning a 36-week child to death is somehow going to make the world a better place in God's eyes.
When I was deconstructing my own faith,
I feel really bad now.
Oh no, please don't. Sorry. Please don't.
I just feel bad that I asked about that, because I didn't know about your child.
No. It's absolutely fine. It's a tragedy, but it's life.
At least like when Yeah, like I said, when I was deconstructing as a Christian, like I was turning to the book of Job because that's what people were telling me to look at when we were talking about this kind of problem of evil, because it didn't make much sense to me either. And if you're not familiar with the book of Job, it's this book where this character Job is basically, well, no, it actually starts off with God literally making a bet with Satan. That is not exaggeration. That is what it is. Saying that, Job would God expects Job to be this loyal follower, and Satan says, no, he won't. It's the Satan. It's actually not maybe the character Satan that we often think about in popular media, but that's for Megan to correct, people on. That's not for me. So anyway, the story goes on, and Job is crestfallen because all these things are happening to him. He's losing family members. He has these physical maladies and stuff. And there's these long conversations with him and his friends. Honestly, a lot of the book you can skip, but there's an important part at the end there, which is Job literally having a conversation with God, and God is kind of saying, the morality to this tale is this is happening because I said so, and you should just accept it. And there is no, because there's this grand plan. There is no, like it's literally happening because he's making a bet.
Yeah.
Like that's why it's happening. And
might makes right.
Yeah, like it is. It's a might makes right.
Might makes right.
Yeah, it's a might makes right kind of argument here. And like I think that's how a lot of Christians understand Christianity. I think that's how they make this justification in their heads. Like, oh, I don't know why this is happening, but God is right, and he's always right. And we just have to accept it for the way that it is. And unfortunately, people use this in discrimination of other people too. There's a lot of people I know who would not say the nasty, horrible things about LGBT people, or would at least get out of other people's business when it comes to that stuff. But they feel like they have to because the book says so, and God is right all the time, so we have to follow it. And like this happens in a lot of multiple systemic ways. That's the one that immediately comes to example. But it's a terrible mindset to have. It's an awful mindset, and it's one of the reasons why I talk about it on here. Because man, that's a bad thing to have. It's a bad thing to have. So anyway, Lucas, we've been going on some tangents here. Have we been helpful for your situation at all?
You have, and I don't want to take up too much of your time because I've called a couple times in the past month, but I guess I just want to put it down to this, and you can go ahead and let me go after I ask this question, and y'all can answer while I'm off the air.
Okay.
I just wanted to call to see what you would do if you were in my shoes. Like, I'm the only atheist in a family where 3 of my siblings are preachers. My dad's a preacher. I've been trying to reach out to my sister. I don't know what's going on with that yet. I mean,
yeah,
maybe
I have a brief question of clarification before you go, Lucas. Is your end goal to begin the deconversion process with your family, or is it just to find a way to relate to them that is comfortable for everyone?
Neither.
Okay.
Neither. My goal is I want to know what is true. And as far as I'm convinced of, I feel the way that I was raised is not true. And so that's why I want to talk with my family, because I think that they believe something that is not true. But if it is true, I want to know about it. But from my conviction, I think it's not true.
Yeah.
But like, I guess the main reason I called was for that conversation with my brother. Like, every time I talk to him, it comes down to he's a cancer survivor, and there's no answer for that except for God.
Yeah.
And I always just kind of stop after that. I'm trying to keep the peace with my family. I'm wondering, is there a way to respond without coming across as being insulting or, being antagonizing? Like,
here's the thing. Here's what I think about this,
like
Lucas, because your brother's a preacher, correct? Like, he is already talking his truth to other people publicly. Like I can't imagine that, he would have, it would be unexpected for someone of his position to come across someone who doesn't, believe what he has to say. Like, I'm sure maybe it's not a thing that happens every day because they probably talk to people who believe with what they do, but like that should be something that he should expect if he's going to talk about it in the way that he does and talk about these truths. You know, like I hope that Christians call in and want to talk to me about the stuff again, like while I'm on air, maybe not bothering me in my own time, but like your family members with him. And this is a belief that you grew up with as well with him. I think you have a right to talk to him about this stuff.
If I could get him to call into the show, I would.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
I've told him, I haven't told him about this show yet, but I told him about Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience, and I've told him to call in, and he just told me that there's no point in calling in because basically he believes that he believes and nobody is ever going to change his mind. And earlier this week when I was talking to him, he said something to me that sounded so close-minded that I told him, what you're saying sounds like you're just being closed-minded.
Well, that's the thing. This is my point, Lucas. This is my point, right?
Closed-minded.
Yeah, here's my point. You know, maybe this cancer belief is something that he can personally affix to, and maybe that's not going to, you know, change much. But if he's out there talking about, you know, discrimination towards other people, if he's talking about something that's going to affect the lives of you, me, and everybody else that watches this show, probably, like that matters. That absolutely matters. And I think you would have a right to talk to him about it. But like, those lines are often hard to draw, especially with family, because like I have family that doesn't like that I talk about this stuff. And to be honest, I don't like it when they talk to me about this stuff because I know that those conversations don't go anywhere. But my situation is kind of different in that, you know, I am also publicly facing. If it's a one-on-one personal conversation with a family member that you can trust, that you can have that conversation with, and it's going to affect your relationship with them regardless, because it sounds like it already is, then yeah, I think that conversation is necessary, because it sounds like you know, your relationship with them is going to be affected by, you know, whatever activities they're involved with.
You can't think of a way to have the conversation.
It just starts with gentle questioning. Gentle questioning. You know, that's really all it is. Just like, hey, like I've been thinking about what you said, and I kind of have some doubts. And I'm not sure if I believe what you're saying. Maybe talk this through with me so that it makes sense with me. I think that's the best way you can do it. It's, you know, you can't go up to him and say you're wrong for X, Y, and Z, because studies have shown that's not how you change people's minds. If you're in a situation where you think changing somebody's mind is the best option, or at least Lucas, having a conversation about it, then you've got to play it slow and go for the long game here, because chances are he's not going to change his mind based off of one conversation, but maybe a couple down the line, and maybe he could become a Christian, assuming that he is, or
Ooh, we've lost Dan.
Become a Christian.
Whatever it is you're interested in, because right now, I don't know. It sounds like it's a pretty tense relationship.
No, it's actually not tense. Me and him have a good relationship, but when we do have these conversations, it gets pretty heated. And I try to cut the conversation short before it gets too heated. And it just seems like every conversation he brings up is cancer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Well, I got told that I was lost for a second on the show here, but that's all we have time for this conversation anyway. But Lucas, thanks so much for calling in. Appreciate your call, and I hope I was helpful. Yeah, hope we could help in some way. But we talk about that a lot on this show. This, like, what the boundaries are, and like, when is it a good idea to talk to somebody? When do we have the right to talk to people about their beliefs? And I'm open about this. I struggle with this. I don't know all the time. I do know that if it is going to cause active harm, I will speak out if I can, if I'm in a safe place to do so. But I don't know what, like, do you have any hard lines for yourself, Megan, for this stuff?
I don't, and part of that is because I don't really see other people very much.
Sure.
Part of it for me is, am I going to achieve anything other than hurt feelings or upsets? Because there are some people in my life that I know they believe very differently to me. I do not agree with those beliefs, but I lack the skill base to kind of not necessarily talk them round, but I'm not going to change their minds.
Yeah.
And talking about specific topics, unless I absolutely have to, is going to do nothing but cause interpersonal conflict.
Yeah.
Having said that, if you're telling my kids stuff, if you are making them feel uncomfortable or belittling them in any way, then you and I are going to have a conversation. And it will be along the lines of, I understand you feel differently to me. That's fine. This is an inappropriate thing to say to a child. Please stop. But it's tricky because I don't have these kinds of conversations.
If someone had their, if they said that I believe that God healed my cancer and that was the end of it, I probably wouldn't touch it. I probably wouldn't touch it. But if that same God belief informed, for example, we need to teach young earth creationism in schools, and we need to do this because God is real, and I know God is real because he healed my cancer, well, then maybe I might look at that, right? Like maybe there's something there to kind of parse. But yeah, like it's difficult because I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy that shuts people down. But at the same time, like
there are some things where there are some places where it's appropriate. And
I
think maybe in that instance, that's an interesting one. I think I may go the route of, like you were suggesting earlier, well, God also cures cancer in the Islamic population and the Hindu population. Does that mean we should also be teaching Islam and Hindu religious practices in our American schools? And I strongly suspect the answer will be, oh, hell no.
Right.
Well, see, there you go. Just because it's your religion doesn't mean that it should be imposed on children in an educational setting. Yeah.
It's always tough, like, because I do believe there's times for conflict, and you have to have those conversations. But
I'm a horrible conflict avoider.
It's one of those things.
Awful.
I think a lot of people don't want to get into it, but I don't know. Like I still stand by this idea that there is a time and a place. There is a time and a place. I may not be able to tell you when it's the time and place, but there is a time and a place.
It's necessary sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get to our other callers here. I want to talk to Robert, who's calling in from New York. Robert, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Not much, man. I believe in the interrelation of all things, that there's nothing supernatural that isn't naturally super. And I have faith in science that we may be able to discover the language to talk about all the things that we yet now consider supernatural because we haven't developed the study of yet.
Okay, you're right to the point, Robert. That's interesting. What makes you believe that the supernatural is a thing?
Well, I don't believe it is supernatural. I believe that it is natural, and that we have not discovered how to observe or have invented the dialogue in order to measure and observe it yet.
Okay, so if we don't have the tools, here's my first question then. If we don't have the tools to observe it, then how do we know it's real?
Oh, we don't know that it exists or it doesn't exist. I'm saying that the things like, for instance, the placebo effect, someone may consider that supernatural because we don't know how it works.
Yeah.
But yet I have faith in science that if we studied it and we could discover the vocabulary to which we can discuss how it works. I mean, the vocabulary has it.
I think, I would quibble with you there a bit, because with the placebo effect, we know it's a thing because we can study the effects of it. Like, we can observe the phenomenon happening. We may not understand the exact mechanisms, but we also don't attribute a supernatural explanation to it, right? We just say, like, here's an effect and this is what's happening with it. Obviously, people smarter than me have tried to propose mechanisms as to exactly what's going on there. But I don't know. Is the placebo effect an example of something that we would call the supernatural becoming natural? I don't know. I think that's just we're getting parts of something that's whole.
Yes, in a way that before we understood its effect and was studied its effect and we called it the placebo effect, back then it might be considered something supernatural, might be considered prayer work or some other confirmational bias thing. But we studied its effect long enough to say, in a sense that we as humans can only perceive such a narrow band of the electromagnetic radiation spectrum as sight. our perception limits us to we don't even know all of reality. Everything that exists, whether we can perceive it or not, still exists. We haven't even developed the measurement tools to be able to see, for instance, the universe is what, 5% organic matter, and the rest of it is, like 27% of it is dark matter, 85% of it is dark energy. Which doesn't affect the electromagnetic radiation scale, so we have a hard time even perceiving those things, but we can kind of see a little bit of its effect. So we are just on the precipice of being able to develop the language to talk about things that right now, dark matter might sound supernatural to somebody not in the know. But we are on the precipice of knowledge to be able to, we first need to develop the ability to measure those things, which we don't even know how to measure those things yet.
Sure.
But once we do, I have the faith in science.
Which things do you like? Can you give me an example, Robert? I want to know, like, you're saying we don't have the tools yet to measure some of these things. Like, which examples are you talking about specifically?
Well, for instance, dark matter and dark energy in the world, we barely have the ability to perceive those things.
But we do observe it, though, right? Like, it's not, like, completely made up.
Some of its gravitational effects.
Yeah.
But we don't understand it yet.
Right,
and that's what I was saying. I have the faith in science
here's the difference,
to be able
to
discover that.
They are using scientific measurements and tools and data to come to the conclusion that dark matter and dark energy is a thing, right? Like, we are still using the scientific method to determine that that's real. Like, we haven't used the scientific method yet to figure out where I can read Megan's mind. Like, that's kind of when I talk about the supernatural. Or have we? I don't know. Wait, let's do this right now. Megan, pick a shape.
Okay.
All right. You're thinking of a triangle.
I was thinking of a triangle.
That's science, baby. I just proved it.
There you go.
Thanks, Robert. You.
Science. It works really well, As long as we just acknowledge all the things we hit on and none of the things and ignore all the things we miss on, we'll be great.
Exactly. I see your point, Robert. I see. Like, yes, there's stuff that we don't know yet, and I've been talking here, and I want Megan to come in after I talk here. But like, I concede the point that yes, there are things that we thought maybe weren't possible or weren't known until we predicted phenomenon before we had more data on them, right? Like, that's the thing. We can make predictions about ideas that eventually become true, but I say that tentatively because, like, people can use that same line of argumentation to argue for things that are absolute bullshit and will probably continue to be bullshit. For example, the ability for one human to read another human's mind, certain kinds of medicine working, like
homeopathy.
Homeopathy, things like that. Because, like, that's like people will use that same line of reasoning for stuff that is a scam at worst, or trying to manipulate people for other means at even worser. I guess I don't know where I was going with that, but the point is, like, yeah, I like, you can only say that so far. And again, like, the things that we do know, like with dark matter and other stuff, like, we are using the method. Like, we are figuring out there. We have not used the scientific method to determine that homeopathy is legit, or we've already actually figured it out. Turns out it's bullshit. Like, we use science to figure that out. So anyway, Megan, I want to give you the floor.
I'm honestly not sure I have an awful lot to add, except that, yes, I do agree with the general premise that science is advancing and allows us to better understand the universe and the natural world as it advances. It would be fascinating if science could, like, prove that the goddess Ishtar existed or exists, and that all of the hymns we have in Mesopotamia to the goddess Ishtar were actually efficacious somehow. That would be fascinating. As an historian, I'd love that. But I'm not hopeful.
Yeah, I'm not either. So I don't know, Robert. Is there some?
I would never think that science would even really try to attack try to approach proven of idols and folklore, as much as, like, for instance, the example you used, the reading of being able to think mentally. We've noticed this ability in Aborigine species that
they've been able to almost have conversations, and wait, we didn't even speak a word for the last 20 minutes. They've noticed that, or at least the idea exists that memes, as far as the thought memes, and we've all experienced those synchronistic moments where we're thinking of a song, and as soon as we walk in the room and our partner is singing the same exact song that we were thinking of as we walk in the room, where somebody's about to call us and they're going to call you, you pick up your phone right as they call you. We all experience those things. So what I'm saying is that potentially, and I believe that science, maybe one day, if science is very timid about studying consciousness, and I would love to see the scientific field actually try to study consciousness and the placebo and discovering how those things work, because I think in that study, if we delved in and had the brightest minds working on that sort of stuff, that maybe we would be able to discover how exactly this particle spinning over here affects that particle spinning over there in the other direction instantly. Through distance.
Yeah. I mean, you cut out for a little bit there, Robert, but I got the gist of what you were saying, right? Like, especially with quantum stuff, that I'm not an expert on that, but I do know that what we determine from that will probably be from the methods of science, from like naturalism and stuff. And when it comes to like synchronicity and stuff too, like that stuff doesn't personally impress me. And I'll tell you why. It's because like if we live in a world that has limited options, like of there's only so many songs out there right now to listen to, and you're going to be surrounded by an environment that is probably going to play the songs that because they're probably from your country of origin, or are available to you. Like there's going to be coincidences where you're thinking of a song and you're going to hear it sometime. Like that just has to happen.
If I walk into a room thinking of a song and my spouse is singing it, it's probably because our 3-year-old has been walking around the house singing it for the past 2 hours.
Yeah, and it might be we don't understand the specific triggers as to how that kind of stuff happens either. Maybe we misremember events, or we don't realize like, oh, this happened because I was singing this song yesterday to somebody and now they're singing it, right? So I don't know, like the synchronicity stuff, that doesn't really mean anything to me, I'll be honest. Doesn't do a whole lot, but I don't know. Last thoughts, Robert, before we get to another caller.
No, man, I just appreciate the show. I appreciate the community. I just recently got hip to y'all whole group of awesome individuals, and I've been enjoying this journey of getting introduced to y'all. And
cool.
This is the first time I've ever called into a show, and I really just thank you for what you're doing, and I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan, so thank y'all all for doing what all of y'all are doing, you, the other host, and all of the people working behind the scenes to make this happen. I think it's a beautiful thing. So
I appreciate it, Robert.
Great job.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it. That's a nice way to end that call. Yeah. As far as like, faith that science will prove, I don't know. It's like a faith. I have faith that science will prove my hunches about things. Like that's kind of how I characterize that a little bit. Not to say that there aren't weird and freaky things that I don't completely understand. I do think that we'll understand it through the lens of naturalism, probably for most. Or, I'm also open to the idea of course, there might be things that we will never really understand about the universe. Maybe there are things that observable science isn't able to tell us how something functions. That might be true too, but I will be, it's going to be a very different day for me if I ever resort to the idea of, well, this is happening because God did it. Or, like it's a ghost, obviously. Like, I don't know.
Naturally.
Like, yeah, it's hard for me. It's hard to imagine myself getting to that point just because of everything I know about human biases in science and just, I don't know, the whole shebang. I don't know. What any other thoughts on that, Megan?
No, I think you did a great job summing that up.
Okay, great. Well, with that in mind, then let's go ahead and go to another caller here. We want to talk to David, calling in from Florida. David, what's up?
Hey, how you guys doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. Doing good.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep, hear you just fine. What's up?
Okay, cool. So I was wondering if you guys have ever heard of absurdism, and if so, what is your take on it?
Depends on what do you mean, like the art movement of absurdism, or like, what specific kind? Because that can be disambiguated into some different categories there.
Right. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Albert Camus, but he kind of his view of absurd. Yeah. So I'm just going to present the way I want to discuss it. So we're brought into this world. Let's just assume we didn't choose to be here. We didn't choose to exist. We're brought into existence. And once we're brought here, we seek clarity when it comes to meaning or philosophical, questions and stuff like that. We have these philosophical problems and we desire clarity for them. We also notice that we exist in this world where there's a lot of evil, or how we would, or again, just assume evil exists. We see a lot of it, people being raped, people being killed, these things that we don't particularly desire. And we also, again, we notice that we seek truth, philosophical clarity. And it seems like there's a lot of disagreement on what truth actually is, whether there is a God, whether there is free will. What does it mean to exist? What does it mean to know things? We seek clarity for these things, but it seems like there's a lot of disagreement. And it doesn't seem as if there's something more intelligent than us that is directly communicating to us what these truths are.
Sure.
So for instance, like I've done this a couple of times where, if there's a God, or if there's these beings that exist that are more intelligent than us, that seem to know more than us, that know what these answers are, they don't seem to directly be communicating to all of us saying, hey, this is what it is, you guys. You guys are disagreeing about these matters.
Doesn't look like it.
Again, we can pray for the God. Yeah, so if there was a God, for instance, right, and he knows that we seek truth, and we can use our free will and say, hey, God, I give you permission, given that I want these truths, I want clarity on what denomination is true, or what type of God you are. I'm tired of arguing about these things. You have my permission, given my free will, if I have it, to change my beliefs without the use of any argument. Because I know it seems like a lot of the debates revolve around, hey, what does it take to convince me of this? What, and stuff like that.
So I don't want to interrupt you, David, but I am wondering what your point is.
Oh, sorry. Oh, well, yeah, I was just trying to present the whole view of
just that view. Wait, okay.
Just based on what I said so far, let's just stop right here. Based on what I said so far, what do you think of absurdism?
Yeah, so I understand Albert Camus in his work in existentialism, right? Absurdism being a part of that. I remember reading Myth of Sisyphus when I was working I was working a paper warehouse job in college and doing the afternoon shifts, and I would read Myth of Sisyphus, like some PDF that I probably stole online or something, and on my lunch breaks, and thinking like, man, I do feel like Sisyphus, like moving the rock up the hill right now, because I don't feel like I'm really getting anywhere. So yeah, I understand that his philosophy there a bit, but I think the broader category of what you're talking about here, and again, I'm not a philosophy student, I'm just a guy on the internet, but is talking about really the quote unquote truths, the conclusions that come from postmodernism. This idea that, hey, like the truths that we had of modernism, that we're making progress, that there was this idea of God, that we could, things that we could work towards and, have a place in the universe with are no longer usable to us because of the new advances that we have from science, because of our advances in culture and our understanding of ourselves, and the horrible, horrible violence that has come with modernism. If you don't believe me, you just look at the effects of World War I and World War II and everything that's come since. So yeah, like this idea that we don't have like any reasonable way to navigate in the world is kind of a result of living in what's quickly becoming for globally a postmodern world. And what do we do with that? Well, how do we figure that out? Especially with us as atheists, you and me at least, right, David, that don't have an afterlife to look forward to. Like, how do we navigate that? I can only speak for myself. I can only give a personal answer for what works for me. For me, I find satisfaction in doing this work. This is what's personally meaningful to me. And I find it meaningful in the community. I don't find it meaningful in the universal sense because I don't think I can achieve that. And what meaning means to me now is different from what it was when I was a Christian. What meaning meant for me as a Christian was appealing to my God and doing what was pleasing to him. And now I get to do something that is not only pleasing to me, but hopefully pleasing to other people. But that's something I had to navigate myself through a lot of introspection and a lot of work in trying to put this together. I don't know how I would feel about my life's meaning and purpose if I wasn't doing like a show like this, for example. I mean, I probably want to do it in other ways, but like I do get a sense of fulfillment out of it. And does that mean that people ultimately get their meaning from personal fulfillment? I mean, yeah, I guess so. Does that mean that people could get their personal meaning fulfillment from doing awful things to people? Yeah, that might be the case. And that's a scary thing to think about. But hopefully we can navigate and work together and figure out ways where we can help each other over, doing what's immediately desirable for us, because that can oftentimes have deleterious effects. I think I'm using that word right. Anyway, I'm just, again, a guy on the internet, but that's like my response to absurdism and existentialism and postmodernism, I guess. Megan, what's your take?
I don't have one because I am thoroughly confused.
Yeah.
I like what you just said, so
okay,
we're gonna go with that.
Sounds good. Yeah. I don't know. Am I even making sense to you, David? Did I respond to the question enough?
Oh yeah. And now
Okay,
just to
cool.
give my take on it,
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, I lean more towards the philosophical skeptic tank
Mm-hmm.
when it just comes to the knowledge in general. Like I tried personally to. I'm really not convinced of the arguments in philosophy. I just feel like a lot of terms aren't well defined enough. My background is kind of in math. So I don't think the terms are well defined enough for me personally. I'm not really satisfied with the arguments. So for me, I take a lot of things as axioms. And like for me with calculus and stuff like that, calculus and math, they use a lot of axioms and a lot of them are useful. That's kind of how I view the world. And for me, again, I desire this clarity, but in my experience, I haven't been able to get it from the divine, if there is one. I haven't directly provided that for me. So for me, I'm at the point where it's like, okay, I'm here. I plan on staying here. I don't necessarily like the world that we're in, the lack of clarity, but I decided I'm going to be here. And given that I'm going to be here, I have to define what my purpose is, because when I ask the divine, they don't seem to directly give me an answer. So for me, it was just self-love. And for me, I have to define what self-love means to me. I have to define how I'm going to express that love. And for me, it's just studying math, physics, and stuff like that, showing what treating people the way I would like to be treated and stuff like that. But I do consider myself to be Sisyphus. And in a sense of just like, again, living in an absurd world and figuring out how to deal with it, I do feel like, we're all lifting our own rocks and stuff like that. And you have to just decide to deal with it and create meaning from it. So
I think so too. I think I'm in the same boat as you. I think we can only create meaning for ourselves. Otherwise, you take nihilism is the other option there. Which I'm not a nihilist. I do take meaning in what I do. And most people who say that they're nihilists, by the way, are not actually true nihilists. They really aren't, because if you ask them they prefer if I punch them or not, they would say, oh, I do have a preference. And in that case, okay, there's values there. But anyway, that's a side tangent. I'm sure philosophy nerds will want to argue with me about it in the comment section. Point is, we do have to take our own meaning. And that sucks. That sucks because like if you're like me, David, then we had our meaning kind of robbed from us, like in some sense. And so like we have to fill it with something else. I hope I do good at the end of the day. I can only have other people after me tell me if I did or didn't. But for now, I'm okay. I don't have to have it all figured out either. Nobody expects me to, so I won't expect that for myself. And I think we can also be just kinder to ourselves and realizing like, hey, we're kind of all in this storm together. Some of us have canoes, some of us have yachts, but we're all in this storm and we can help each other out and see what we can do. So that's my take on life. Geez, David, we're going some places here on this show, but thanks for calling. I appreciate it. Interesting.
Are you guys good night?
You too. Have a good one. Gosh, yeah. And it's interesting that we're talking about this as atheists, of course, Megan. And so like, I'm wondering, do you interpret your life stance, your life motivation through the lens of Christianity, or is it more secular for you?
It's a really good question. And I'm not sure that I know. It's the things that I get meaning from are not things that I do for God or like for the glory of God. They're things I do because either I enjoy them or because I think somehow they work towards making the world a better place. If it's even if it's just like making it better for one or two people, maybe I make my daughter a birthday cake, or doing what I do with Digital Hammurabi and with our nonprofit and trying to kind of widen that net of influence. But it's definitely not like I don't wake up and think, or I didn't wake up and think, we should start a nonprofit because I think that would make God happy. It was I feel like this is the right thing to do because we can do something to help others.
I can respect that. Yeah, I mean, like I think when I was a Christian, like like, you know, obviously I just said like, yeah, I was pleasing God, but there was something that I was getting out of that too, obviously. Like, and I think now, like, I can just have that for myself. Yeah. That I am getting something out of it. And does that mean that, again, like it is ultimately a personal fulfillment? And so like, what does that say about ethics in general? Is it just all of us like finding out ways of personally fulfilling ourselves? Maybe. I'm not really someone that really argues for the whole objective morality thing. Contrary to my name, I think people assume that, but I don't. Like I do think that ethics ultimately boils down to the desires of like what human beings want, what's best for them. And I'm not sure if that, well, I mean, I could argue with for sentient beings in general too, but it like I think that sense of ethics really is an invented concept. Yeah.
And I think then you get into like questions of whether altruism actually exists and whether I feel good about the work I do because purely it helps people or because I'm the one helping and that reflects well on me. And I feel that at some point does it really matter whether or not it's altruistic if it is having a positive impact on the lives of others?
Yeah, I mean, it does say something about how we should organize ourselves, I guess, right? Like, because if we are saying that if at the end of the day we are helping each other and that's what's most important, then we are saying something about ethics. We're saying that's what's most important. So we have then we establish a goal. And if you don't have that sense, see, you just go around and around. I don't have any satisfying answers on this topic other than what I've given, okay, which is like I just do what I do. And I think I'm doing good. And until somebody can show me otherwise, we'll see.
And I honestly think that a lot of people are in this, like, that's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
I hope it's good. I hope it improves things for myself and for other people.
We're just trying to do our best, Megan. We're just trying to do our best.
Exactly.
But anyway, let's get to some other callers here before we wrap things up for today. We got a little bit of time here. So let's talk to Daryl calling in from Virginia. Daryl, what's up?
Oh, not a whole lot. How do you do?
Man, I'm just having a good old time. What's happening?
Well, I'm writing a story that involves near future sci-fi and medical tech stuff, and I've come across a lot of ethical quandaries as to how they would play out in real life. And so I'm really more asking your opinions. And I apologize if I sound religious about this topic because people have said that. But in the near future, I think we're going to see a time where medical technology will be able to fix anything beyond some catastrophic trauma. So in theory, we would, left alone, be able to live forever. How do you think that would play out in our society? Man,
I'm so glad you're asking me, ObjectivelyDan, medical bioethicist, about this question. Obviously, I don't have that credentials, but I mean, I've seen Black Mirror once or twice, so I guess I could answer. I mean, gosh, I think living for like if we could live forever and maybe have the choice to like turn that off, that would be cool. But if we didn't have the choice to turn that off, I don't know.
Well, in this situation, you would also be able to live in a certain like age range. You would be able to basically reverse aging and stuff. So you wouldn't get old and want to die necessarily. So, you know, whatever your favorite age was.
Stay in the range, or is it like a Benjamin Button situation?
Hey, whatever you want, man.
Okay. Well, I mean, Alphaville had that song, "Do We Really Want to Live Forever?" forever young. So like, I think starting with that, I would say, yeah, I would want to be young for as long as I possibly could be. Seems cool. But then we talk about like, oh, but then if we're still birthing people and then we have more and more and more people and people aren't dying, that's a lot of people. Yeah. And people need resources. People need space. People need, and also like we play a part in the natural systems as well by our bodies decaying and stuff and doing other things with that. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I never thought about that last point.
Would this be like
exactly why
would this be like a pay to play situation,
Ooh,
or like are we getting into another realm of privilege here?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. Yeah.
Well, without getting into too many details that could send my personal ideas out to be stolen, as it were, this would be a situation where there is no need for anything. Everything can be provided because there was a way to transmute elements and develop energy in ways that we hadn't previously discovered before. So there would be no need for.
So what you're saying is healthcare,
universal healthcare for everyone. Right. I'm on board.
I like how we were both thinking the same thing there. That's great.
Yeah, sure.
You know, if you want a certain lifestyle, you can literally just get without having to pay anything you want for it. But do you think that people would eventually get bored, or do you think that literally nobody would? Like, do you think struggle and, you know, wanting and yearning is part of being a human, or do you think we could actually survive without it?
See, if this is a future, because like this is why transhumanism is really interesting. People think it's weird, but it's interesting because part of being human is having that psychology of getting bored of stuff over time and losing interest and, you know, things that we might consider bad for us in some contexts. But if we can modify those aspects too, maybe not. If we're talking about human beings existing as they are today, but with the options you're presenting, I imagine people would get bored, or people would want to change their situation.
I think eventually they would, but the thing is, if we're talking about a world where you can essentially stop aging and it sounds like money is no longer an issue. Like if you get bored of like living where I do in Southern Maryland, I can just move to Japan for 30 years, learn Japanese. Like, why not? And then maybe go to Australia for 20 years. Like I suspect people would get bored eventually, because it does seem to be, and again, I'm not a neurologist, I have no idea what I'm talking about, but it seems to be a kind of inbuilt, innate thing. And I do wonder if if the lack of death would have like everyone would just kind of stop because there's no driving force anymore.
Yeah, we're kind of that's the thing about evolution too, right? Like we're alive the way that we are because of conflict and stuff. And like the less conflict that we introduce, like I think that, I don't know, like there's a part of me that, you know, like people watch like weird morbid stuff on TV and stuff and you wonder why, and it's like, I don't know, I think people are kind of drawn towards that just because of how we are evolutionarily and living in a modern society where we've taken away a lot of that conflict and stuff. I think people do seek out conflict sometimes. I don't know how healthy that is, but I do think that happens. Like people get invested in sports games and video games and stuff like that. Even though there's no, you know, like material benefit to that a lot of times. And sometimes you get like bad emotions from it, but people are still really interested in it because they like that stimulus. And I don't know.
That's an interesting question though.
Do you think that, I'm sorry?
It's a really interesting question.
Yeah, one last question, Daryl, and then we're going to move on.
Oh, sure. Do you think that in this latent immortality situation and people not having to face death, do you think that would motivate people to lean towards religion more or less?
Well, what would there be to be religious about if we're living in a society where I'm also presuming this is a world where most of our ills are taken care of, right? Because I imagine if you...
is like you wouldn't have to die. So like if you do elect to die, you know, what's on the other side, you know, nobody knows. But would that lead to people being more religious since they don't have to suffer through and have this inevitable goal?
Well, I think that, honestly, I do think that we will become more secularized the more that we advance as people, but I don't necessarily think that we will become less religious. So like I do think that like individual sectarian beliefs about religion will happen as a natural consequence of people. I think like I think the religions that we see today and people who even call themselves non-religious, sometimes they just like interpret old religious ideals in new ways, and so they don't even consider themselves religious, even though they don't realize the ideas that they think about are religious ones. I don't know, but it's complicated because history could turn differently in the future too. Maybe this is just the result of a temporary blip. I do think that people are broadly more secular when you close material gaps, though. I think like that can be demonstrated through data. So I and that side of me says that they would be less religious. But like we're also seeing crazy stuff that people are believing now that I would never assume people would believe. And we live in a world where we got the internet and stuff. Yeah, QAnon is still a thing, and that's become a religious movement, and then all kinds of other stuff. So yeah, I don't know. A lot of I don't knows, Daryl. I don't know if you're super helpful, but it's an interesting question to think about.
A couple pretty good points.
Cool.
Yeah, you give me a pretty good. A couple good points to think about, so I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, cool. Hey, give us some. You have to give me and Megan credit in your book now.
Absolutely.
So that's how that works.
Okay.
So,
well, would I be able to like email you about a more specific thing?
The email for the show is truth@atheist-community.org, and that's for anybody who has any inquiries related to the show. So that is open for people. So there you go, Daryl. Hopefully we were good answerers to your questions. I don't know that we were, but I'm glad he got something out of it. So
I'm bad at thought experiments like that because my response is, I just don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. It's better to not know and then to be like really sure about something and be really wrong. Right.
That's
like,
true.
That's how a lot of bad policies are made. So anyway, thankfully I'm not in charge of that department of human health. So no skin off my back. Let's take one more call here before we end tonight's show. We're going to talk to Colson calling in from Texas. Colson, what's up?
Hi, Megan. Hi, Dan. Thanks for taking my call. I actually wanted to respond to something that Megan said during the first call, but I think Lucas.
Yeah.
Specifically, Megan, I think you said that, and don't let me misquote you. It was something like, God, you wouldn't want to credit God with curing someone of cancer because that implies that God, sentences a bunch of other people to death, doesn't cure them, in other words.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just trying to get some clarity on sort of your beliefs because I think it's sort of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Does this sort of imply that you believe in maybe a more deistic God or what does the God that you believe in, what does the God that you believe in do? Does he or she act in the world? Because if so, does any action by God imply that he sentences people to death? I guess is my question.
Good question.
That's a really good question. I don't think I have a really good answer. So I personally have not seen anything that I would consider good evidence for God acting in the world. Yes. And I don't know what I would consider to be good evidence. Yeah. That's a really bad answer. I'm sorry.
It's not a bad answer. It is an honest answer. And that is what's most important.
I try. Honesty is important.
So there you go.
No, yeah, I don't consider God to be active. I don't consider that I have seen action. When I was younger, I had this confirmation bias that a lot of people have, that bad things would happen, but then it would be okay in the end. And ultimately it was. And I was like, oh, okay, good. There is like a path. I was supposed to go through the bad stuff. And now everything has resolved itself and I am a better person for it. And I'm at the place now where I think that I have been irrevocably shaped by the experiences I've had, but I don't necessarily believe that there was a plan in those experiences mapped out for me by a God. I think that is just the path that my life took because of my own choices and because of the choices of others. So yeah, I don't know what I would consider to be like evidence of God moving in the world. It's like, it's a tricky one. I don't have a good answer.
Yeah,
Well, thank you for answering.
Go ahead, Cole.
Of course.
Did you have a follow
I
up?
was just gonna say thank you. I mean, I didn't have a follow up. I was just thanks, and that was a great answer.
Yeah. You know, my thoughts when hearing your answer, Meg, is like, if somebody were to ask me, like, you know, what is evidence of God, right? Like, what does that look like? Like, that's a hard answer. They're a hard question to answer because it's why I use the atheist label. If you follow me on Twitter, because like God is used in so many different ways and is defined differently in so many different cultures and ideas that, like, first of all, you have to tell me what that means. And a theistic version of that God, you know, there would be demonstrations of that because we would have to be able to look at what he did and what he didn't. And, you know, like at the end of the day, like he could make that clear, or she, you know, like they can have a role in that process. It doesn't have to be human beings figuring that out. I consider that a point. But even let's say that it is up to us as human beings to figure it out, that somehow we don't have that option. Like, well, what is that God going to do? I don't know. Like, how do, like, if they're not open to examination, then we really can't make that determination. So either way, I'm still left with not believing, right? If they are not making themselves open to us in a way that we can understand, then the conclusion isn't that I should still believe anyway. For me,
Right.
The conclusion is I have to wait until evidence is given otherwise. So that's a reason why, you know, I withhold belief. One of many reasons, but a particular one. And also that, you know, for me, Christianity was towards the end an amalgamation of personal experiences that I had constructed into a Christian narrative. And when I realized that narrative doesn't have to be an exclusively Christian one and can be explained by natural processes, then or even other religious narratives that can be used as a placeholder, then it didn't make sense for me to hold Christianity to be the exclusive arbiter of that, or to shape my experiences within a Christian lens. So I decided to drop it, and that was what made most sense to me. And it's why I can't call myself a Christian now too. I just have no real compelling reason to go down that path, along with just the baggage that's there and you know, everything else. But yeah, it's a great question you asked there, Colson. Really appreciate that. And hope you can ask more great questions like that in the future. But for now, we are running out of time here, folks. This has been Truth Wanted. My name is Objectively Dan. My guest today was Megan Lewis. Megan, where can people find you at?
So we're on YouTube, youtube.com/Digital Hammurabi. We have a website, which is just digitalhammurabi.com. I'm on Twitter at digi_Hammurabi. And the nonprofit that I run is called HAPS, which is Humans Against Poor Scholarship. And we do primarily give scholarship money to PhD students studying the ancient Near East. We are giving 4 scholarships to PhD students over this summer. And it's kind of like The Voice, or something like one of those talent show where people like call in and vote. We interview all of the applicants over our YouTube channel and ask them about their research, and they get half an hour to kind of explain who they are, what they're doing, give our audience the chance to ask questions about that aspect of the ancient world they're looking at. And then at the end of the interview process, everybody who's donated to HAPS over the year gets the gets the chance to vote on the student that they most want to see funded. So it's a lot of fun. I always learn an awful lot. And this is our 3rd year of offering scholarships. So we're really, really proud.
Awesome. Cool stuff. You guys should check out the channel, like I said, and also check out Dr. Josh as well, and check out his episode. Again, that was a couple weeks back. You can find it on the YouTube. But don't go away just yet. We are going to be on the Discord after show answering you guys' questions. So if you're watching this live, go check it out. We're going to be there for a couple minutes talking to you guys. So link to that is in the description. But folks, this is Truth Wanted. This show can be found on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, but at YouTube as well, of course. So like, subscribe, comment, do what you got to do. Help make this show available to everybody. I do appreciate it. But there's other ways you can support the show as well. I already mentioned the Patreon, patreon.com/truthwanted. You get your name shouted out if you decide to donate on there. Appreciate you guys who donate on patreon.com. We also have a merch store. We got a store. We got merch. You need a mask? I hope you do. Well, I mean, I don't hope you need if you need a mask, we got it for you. Okay. And if you want, you can have a Truth Wanted one. They're pretty cool. And we got some other stuff in there too. So check that out if you haven't already. You can also support the show by donating directly on the membership thing, the YouTube member stuff. You get cool little emoticons if you do it that way. You can click on that. It's on the side there of the channel if you're watching this live. So do that if you will. You can follow me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan, and you can email the show. It's truth@atheist-community.org. I do check that email. I'm pretty much the only one that looks at that one here, I think. But anyway, yeah, like I look at that for show inquiries and stuff. So please reach out to me if you like. And last but never, ever, oh, not least, there's another thing too, though, I need to mention, which is the Facebook group. You should look at the Truth Wanted Facebook group. I can't forget about that Facebook group. That Facebook group is awesome. It's run by fans for fans. So check out the group on there. But now I can talk about what's last but never least. Megan, do you know what that is?
I don't.
It's the crew. It's the crew that helps make the show happen every week. We need to thank
the
them.
most
Thank you,
important
crew.
people.
Absolutely. Look at these folks.
That's a really difficult job.
Folks. There's some interesting things happening as usual. If you're watching this live, the crew just comes up with funny ways to end this show every week. I wish I was as creative as Puck. I'll be honest. Puck,
I want some orange soda now.
Yeah, orange soda would be good.
I don't have any.
Good. So anyways, folks, thanks so much for being on the show, Megan. And thank you guys for watching. Megan, do you have any words of wisdom you want to shout out before we end tonight's program?
Be nice. Don't be a dick. The end.
That's it, folks. That's it. Book of Megan just got published right here on Truth Wanted. It contains those 3 sentences. Appreciate you, Megan. And thank you, everybody watching. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.